Band of Brothers, 2001, showed us young men forged by war, duty, and fear. But 25 years later, those same faces carry stories far heavier than the uniforms they wore. What they endured after the cameras stopped rolling is shocking, painful, and almost impossible to believe. Stay with us as we revisit their journeys, then and now. Damian Lewis, as Major Richard D. Winters. Damian Lewis was born on the 11th of February 1971 in London, England. At 30 years old, he played Major Richard D. Winters, the composed, morally grounded leader of Easy Company in Band of Brothers. That performance became the emotional spine of the series, proving that calm authority could carry more weight than battlefield spectacle. That calm was learned, not inherited. Lewis grew up as the eldest son of John Watson Lewis, a city insurance broker, and Charlotte Mary Bowater, inside a world shaped by rules, expectations, and unspoken pressure. The discipline of elite boarding schools trained him to stand straight and speak carefully, the same restraint later seen in the Forsyte Saga and reinforced again in Band of Brothers. That discipline followed him into marriage. In 2007, Lewis married actress Helen McCrory, and their relationship became a rare refuge from public life, especially as his career intensified through demanding roles like Homeland and Wolf Hall. When McCrory was diagnosed with cancer, work no longer felt like ambition. It became a schedule built around hospital rooms and time measured in treatments rather than premieres. Loss did not arrive gently. Helen McCrory died in April 2021 at the age of 52, leaving Lewis to navigate grief while still embodying control on screen. Years earlier, a motorcycle accident in 1998 had already dragged him into depression, and now the emotional armor he relied on cracked under cumulative strain. Performances praised for their depth came at a personal cost, turning acclaim into something heavy rather than celebratory. Today, Damian Lewis is 55 years old. He continues acting and recording music, choosing work that allows space rather than exhaustion, including time devoted to songwriting and live performance. With an estimated net worth of around $25 million, Lewis now moves forward deliberately, reshaping a life defined less by dominance and more by survival after profound loss. Ron Livingston, as Captain Lewis Nixon. Ron Livingston was born on June 5, 1967, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, USA. At 34 years old, he played Captain Lewis Nixon, the brilliant, alcohol-dependent intelligence officer in Band of Brothers. His portrayal exposed how intelligence and loyalty can still fracture under pressure, giving the series one of its most unsettling emotional arcs. That fracture traces back to upbringing. Livingston was raised by Kurt Livingston, an aerospace electronics engineer, and Linda Renus Livingston, a Lutheran pastor, in a household grounded in responsibility and order. Choosing acting meant stepping away from certainty, a tension later mirrored in Office Space, where quiet despair replaced ambition and echoed again in Band of Brothers. Relationships carried similar strain. After ending his engagement to actress Lisa Sheridan, Livingston married Rosemarie DeWitt in 2009, forming a family while managing a career built on long shoots and emotionally draining roles. Projects like Boardwalk Empire and later A Million Little Things demanded sustained intensity, forcing constant negotiation between professional immersion and domestic presence. The emotional weight accumulated through performance. Living inside characters defined by addiction, grief, and collapse, first Nixon, later figures shaped by loss and regret, left little distance between script and reality. Each role deepened his reputation for authenticity, but also required repeated returns to psychological spaces most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Now, Ron Livingston is 59 years old. He remains active in film and television, favoring character-driven stories over visibility, continuing a career marked by quiet consistency. With an estimated net worth of about $5 million, Livingston's legacy rests not on spectacle, but on portraying the cost of endurance again and again without flinching. Donnie Wahlberg as First Sergeant. Carwood Lipton. Donnie Wahlberg was born on August 17, 1969, in Dorchester, Boston, Massachusetts. At 32 years old, he played First Sergeant Carwood Lipton, the steady, unbreakable backbone of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His performance grounded the series in endurance, showing how leadership often survives quietly, long after louder men collapse. That strength was forged early. Donnie grew up as the eighth of 9 children of Donald Edmund Wahlberg, a delivery driver, and Alma Elaine Donnelly Wahlberg, a bank clerk and nurse's aide, inside a crowded Irish Catholic household strained by money and instability. When his parents divorced in 1982, pressure intensified, forcing him to work young while carrying responsibility beyond his years. It later echoed through disciplined performances in The Sixth Sense and Band of Brothers. Fame arrived fast and violently. As a founding member of New Kids on the Block, teenage stardom brought excess, scrutiny, and the infamous 1991 hotel fire incident, a moment that nearly derailed his life before adulthood had even settled. Recovery meant rebuilding credibility role by role, from Band of Brothers to the long-running grind of Blue Bloods, where the physical and emotional toll of police work mirrored battles he had already fought privately. Marriage offered both refuge and rupture. Donnie married Kimberly Fay in 1999, and together they had 2 sons, but the relationship fractured under the weight of career pressure and separation, ending in divorce in 2008. Stability returned when he married Jenny McCarthy in 2014, a union that marked a visible shift toward balance after years defined by turbulence rather than control. In 2026, Donnie Wahlberg is 57 years old. He remains active across music, television, and production, splitting time between performance and business ventures like Wahlburgers, while maintaining a demanding public schedule. With an estimated net worth of around $25 million, Wahlberg stands as a survivor of early chaos, still moving, still working, long after the noise should have broken him. Scott Grimes as Technical Sergeant Donald Malarkey. Scott Grimes was born on July 9, 1971, in Lowell, Massachusetts. At 30 years old, he played Technical Sergeant Donald Malarkey, the sharp-edged, battle-hardened infantryman in Band of Brothers. His portrayal added volatility to the series, capturing how anger, loyalty, and exhaustion can coexist inside the same uniform. His childhood appeared orderly on the surface. Raised by Rick Grimes and Pam Grimes, Scott entered entertainment early, landing film and television roles while still a teenager. That early exposure brought opportunity but also pressure, as he balanced school with work, a rhythm that followed him into later projects like Party of Five and eventually Band of Brothers, where emotional intensity replaced youthful momentum. Adulthood brought repetition instead of relief. Grimes married Dawn Bailey in 1997, divorcing a decade later, then married Megan Moore in 2011, only to separate again. His third marriage, to actress Adrienne Palicki in 2019, collapsed within months, a rapid unraveling that mirrored the instability often written into his characters, including his long arc on ER as Dr. Archie Morris. Work rarely slowed the emotional churn. Roles in ER demanded sustained exposure to addiction and failure, while voice work on American Dad, and later, the Orville layered long production schedules onto personal exhaustion. Each project extended his visibility, but none offered permanence, reinforcing a pattern of momentum without rest. Today, Scott Grimes is 55 years old. He remains active in acting and music, continuing voice work and select screen appearances while maintaining a lower public profile. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, Grimes' career tells a quieter story. Shane Taylor as Technician. 5th grade Eugene Doc Rowe. Shane Taylor was born on March 13, 1974 in Dover, England. At 27 years old, he played technician 5th grade Eugene "Doc" Rowe, the quiet frontline medic of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His performance reshaped the series by proving that endurance and compassion could be as devastating as gunfire, especially in the harrowing episode Bastogne. That stillness was formed early. Raised on England's south coast by a family of mixed Scottish and American roots, Taylor grew up far from glamour, surrounded by discipline and restraint rather than encouragement toward fame. Training at the Webber Douglas Academy of Dramatic Art demanded emotional precision, helping him later surface not only in Band of Brothers but again in The Day of the Triffids. Marriage offered grounding. Taylor married Ashley McKinney on July 7, 2001, the same year Band of Brothers aired, and together they raised 2 children while deliberately staying out of the public spotlight. As opportunities narrowed after the miniseries, the stability of family life counterbalanced professional uncertainty, especially during smaller but emotionally heavy projects like Bomber. Violence on screen left its mark. Playing medics and soldiers meant repeated exposure to suffering, and later action-heavy roles such as Strike Back. Vengeance came with real physical injury, including cracked ribs and delayed shoots. These roles demanded restraint under pressure, echoing the emotional containment that had defined his most celebrated work. Now, Shane Taylor is 52 years old. He continues acting selectively in film and television, favoring character-driven roles over visibility. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, his career reflects quiet longevity, built not on stardom, but on credibility earned through understatement. Frank John Hughes as Staff Sergeant William Wild Bill Guarnere. Frank John Hughes was born on November 11, 1967, in the Bronx, New York City. At 34 years old, he played Staff Sergeant William Wild Bill Guarnere, the ferocious, impulsive enforcer of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His raw intensity injected volatility into the series, embodying how rage could become both weapon and liability. That aggression grew from survival. Raised in the Bronx, Hughes balanced artistic ambition with physical labor, studying jazz composition at Berklee College of Music before turning to acting and joining Teamsters Local 814 as a furniture mover to stay afloat. The grind hardened him, shaping later performances in The Sopranos and 24. Family life brought contrast. Hughes married Jelena in 1987, and together they raised a child while he navigated an unpredictable career built on nearly constant work. Acting rarely paused long enough to offer security, pushing him toward writing as another means of control when roles alone no longer felt sufficient. That pivot carried its own struggle. While appearing in films like Catch Me If You Can, Hughes poured energy into scripts, culminating in Pax Americana breaking the blacklist in 2013 and opening doors with major studios. Success followed, but the transition from actor to creator demanded relentless pressure, replacing physical exhaustion with creative risk. In 2026, Frank John Hughes is 59 years old. He remains active as both actor and screenwriter, with projects developed for major studios while continuing selective on-screen work. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, Hughes's career stands as proof that intensity does not fade. It simply changes form, moving from performance into authorship. Rick Gomez as technician. 4th grade George Lewes. Rick Gomez was born on June 1, 1972, in Bayonne, New Jersey, USA. At 29 years old, he played technician 4th grade George Lewes, the sharp-tongued radio operator and mimic of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His humor cut through fear, giving the series its most human release valve in moments when silence could have crushed morale. That instinct for imitation started early. Gomez was the firstborn son of Richard Gomez Sr., raised alongside his younger brother Joshua Gomez, who would later follow him into acting. So Rick learned to perform, to be noticed, turning observation into survival. This experience is later surfaced in The Adventures of Pete and Pete long before war uniforms replaced teenage chaos. Marriage brought steadiness where the industry did not. Gomez married Jennifer Wymore on September 15, 2001, just as Band of Brothers was reaching audiences, and together they built a quiet family life with 2 children. While leading roles remained scarce after the miniseries, he continued working steadily, appearing in shows like Justified and Narcos, Mexico, often inhabiting the edges rather than the spotlight. Career frustration lingered beneath the surface. Voice acting became another outlet, most notably as Zack Fair in the Final Fantasy VII franchise, where performance relied on voice alone rather than visibility. The shift kept him active, but also reinforced how quickly acclaim from Band of Brothers faded into niche recognition. Today, Rick Gomez is 54 years old. He remains active as an actor and voice performer, regularly reuniting with the Band of Brothers cast and honoring its legacy. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, Gomez's story is one of persistence. Proof that not all impact is measured by billing, but by memory. Michael Cudlitz as Sergeant Denver Bull Randleman. Michael Cudlitz was born on December 29, 1964, in Queens, New York City, USA. At 36 years old, he played Sergeant Denver Bull Randleman, the fearless, physically dominant soldier of Easy Company in Band of Brothers. His presence embodied brute survival, turning raw strength into one of the series' most unforgettable survival arcs. Cudlitz's path was built on work rather than myth. Raised by practical parents after moving to New Jersey, he trained at CalArts, balancing performance with behind-the-scenes labor in television production. That dual exposure to art and construction later fed into grounded performances in projects like Southland. Family life offered stability amid escalating intensity. Cudlitz married Rachel Cudlitz, whom he met at CalArts, and together they raised 2 children while his roles grew more punishing. On Southland, he portrayed a police officer battling chronic pain and addiction, and on The Walking Dead, relentless violence demanded sustained physical and emotional endurance across multiple seasons. The strain was cumulative. Repeated exposure to brutality on screen blurred comfort and exhaustion, even as acclaim followed, including a Critics' Choice Television Award for Southland. Later, stepping into Lex Luthor on Superman and Lois required yet another transformation, shifting from physical dominance to controlled menace. Now, Michael Cudlitz is 62 years old. He continues acting across television and voice work, choosing roles that balance authority with restraint. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, Cudlitz's career reflects durability, built not on reinvention, but on enduring the weight of every role he carried. Neil McDonough as First Lieutenant. Lynn Buck Compton. Neil McDonough was born on February 13, 1966, in Dorchester, Massachusetts, USA. At 35 years old, he played First Lieutenant Lynn Buck Compton, the fearless, hard-charging officer of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His performance gave the series a sharp edge, capturing how courage can coexist with internal collapse when pressure never lets up. That toughness was shaped early. McDonough grew up in Barnstable, Massachusetts, the youngest of 6 children born to Frank McDonough and Catherine Bush McDonough, Irish immigrants who ran motels and raised their family in strict Catholic tradition. Nicknamed Headster by his brothers because of his large head, he learned to endure teasing and physical roughhousing. This upbringing later fed into commanding roles like Minority Report and Flags of Our Fathers. Marriage became a defining anchor. In 2003, McDonough married Ruve Robertson, whom he met while filming Band of Brothers overseas, and together they raised 5 children. As his career accelerated through projects such as Desperate Housewives and Boomtown, faith and family dictated firm boundaries that set him apart in an industry built on compromise. Those boundaries came at a cost. McDonough was removed from major television roles, including a high-paying series job, after refusing to perform intimate scenes, a decision rooted in religious conviction rather than negotiation. Even while portraying villains like Damien Dark in Arrow, His principles narrowed opportunities, turning success into something earned through resistance rather than compliance. In 2026, Neal McDonough is 60 years old. He continues acting and producing, appearing in projects like Tulsa King while developing his own films, including The Last Rodeo. With an estimated net worth of around $7 million, McDonough's career stands as a rare example of longevity shaped not by flexibility, but by refusal. Ross McCall as technician. 5th grade Joseph Liebgott. Ross McCall was born on January 13, 1976, in Port Glasgow, Scotland. At 25 years old, he played technician 5th grade Joseph Liebgott, the sharp-eyed, morally alert soldier of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His portrayal brought conscience into combat, giving the series one of its most quietly unsettling perspectives on violence. Displacement marked his early years. McCall was born to John McCall, a fire brigade officer, and Maggie McCall, a nurse, before moving to Kent, England at age 7. Raised Catholic alongside an older brother who later became a police officer, Ross learned structure early, an influence that later surfaced in performances such as Green Street and Luther, where loyalty and aggression collided. Career momentum proved uneven. While Band of Brothers opened doors, sustained leading roles remained elusive, pushing McCall into supporting turns across television, including White Collar and 24, Live Another Day. Each role kept him visible but rarely central, reinforcing the gap between recognition and security. Personal relationships mirrored that instability. McCall's high-profile engagement to Jennifer Love Hewitt ended abruptly in 2008, followed years later by another broken engagement to Alessandra Mastronardi after a long relationship. Between projects, he turned outward, producing documentaries supporting Sea Shepherd, channeling frustration into advocacy rather than retreat. Today, Ross McCall is 50 years old. He continues acting selectively, balancing television work like Silo with environmental activism and veteran-focused charity efforts. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, McCall's story is one of persistence without protection, still standing but shaped by roads that never quite leveled out. Matthew Settle as Captain Ronald Spears. Matthew Settle was born on September 17, 1969 in Hickory, North Carolina, USA. At 32 years old, he played Captain Ronald Spears, the feared, myth-shrouded officer of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His presence altered the tone of the series, turning rumor, discipline, and moral ambiguity into one of its most unsettling forces. That intensity had roots at home. Settle was raised as the youngest of 6 children by Robert Settle, a Baptist minister, and Joan Settle, inside a faith-driven household. Growing up in the shadow of older siblings forced him to harden early. This dynamic later reflected in emotionally guarded performances such as Into the West and the cold restraint he carried into Band of Brothers. Adulthood brought visibility, but little stability. After early film success in I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, Settle became widely recognized as Rufus Humphrey on Gossip Girl, playing a conflicted father figure for years. The role demanded emotional constancy rather than dominance, a sharp contrast to Spears. Yet the long television grind narrowed his range in the public eye. His private life fractured quietly. In 2006, Settle married Israeli actress Naama Nativ, and they welcomed a daughter in 2009, but the marriage dissolved by 2011. The separation unfolded away from headlines, yet it coincided with a period where career momentum slowed and theatrical work, including his Broadway turn in Chicago. Now, Matthew Settle is 57 years old. He continues acting selectively across film, stage, and television, balancing character work with personal privacy. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, Settle's legacy rests on one indelible truth. Few performances in Band of Brothers still unsettle audiences the way Spears does, long after the gunfire fades. Ion Bailey as Private David Kenyon Webster, Eion Bailey was born on June 8, 1976, in Santa Ynez Valley, California, USA. At 25 years old, he played Private David Kenyon Webster, the intellectual outsider and observer of Easy Company, in Band of Brothers. His portrayal reframed the war through distance and reflection, offering the series a rare inward gaze rather than brute momentum. That distance began in youth. Bailey struggled academically until discovering drama in high school, a turning point that redirected failure into focus. Training later sharpened his sensitivity, visible in early films like Fight Club and Center Stage, where restraint and internal conflict mattered more than volume, traits that defined Webster's quiet resistance to blind heroism. Career growth came in uneven waves. While Band of Brothers brought prestige, Bailey drifted between psychologically demanding roles, including Once Upon a Time and The Stand. Each project leaned heavily on emotional precision, keeping him respected but rarely secure within the industry hierarchy. Family life introduced steadiness. In 2011, Bailey married Wayne Mengesha, a Canadian theater director, and together they raised 2 children while navigating careers rooted in intensity rather than routine. Domestic grounding contrasted sharply with roles that required breakdown, obsession, and moral dislocation. Today, Eion Bailey is 50 years old. He remains active on screen, most notably as Jim Matthews in From, continuing to inhabit psychologically layered characters. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, Bailey's career stands as a study in quiet endurance, proof that subtlety can survive in an industry addicted to noise. David Schwimmer as Captain Herbert Sobel. David Schwimmer was born on November 2, 1966, in Flushing, Queens, New York, USA. At 35 years old, he played Captain Herbert Sobel, the rigid, feared, and deeply divisive training officer of Easy Company in Band of Brothers. His performance reshaped the series by turning authority itself into a psychological threat, forcing viewers to confront how leadership can fracture men before the enemy ever does. That tension echoed his youth. Schwimmer was raised by Arthur Schwimmer and Arlene Coleman Schwimmer, both prominent attorneys, and grew up feeling out of place after his family moved to Beverly Hills. Surrounded by privilege and ambition, he felt alienated by values that didn't match his own, working summers as a legal process server for his mother while quietly questioning whether he belonged anywhere at all. That outsider instinct later surfaced in roles that thrived on discomfort rather than charm. Fame arrived with overwhelming force. As Ross Geller on Friends, Schwimmer became one of the most recognizable faces on television, a success that financed his future but narrowed public perception. While still carrying that global image, he stepped into Band of Brothers and later films like Apt Pupil and Uprising, deliberately choosing roles that provoked hostility instead of affection. His private life carried its own fractures. Schwimmer married Zoe Buckman in 2010, and they welcomed a daughter the following year, but the marriage ended in 2017. The separation unfolded quietly, followed by a deliberate retreat from tabloid exposure, even as he poured energy into directing projects like Run, Fat Boy, Run, and confronting darker material in The People vs. O.J. Simpson. In 2026, David Schwimmer is 60 years old. He continues acting, directing, and producing across television and film while maintaining strict privacy around family life. With an estimated net worth of around $120 million, his legacy is paradoxical: beloved for comedy, remembered in Band of Brothers for cruelty, and respected for refusing to stay comfortable. 25 years later, the faces have changed, but the memories haven't faded. Where did time carry these soldiers after the war ended, and which stories still echo the loudest in 2026? If Band of Brothers meant something to you, share your favorite character in the comments. Subscribe for more then and now journeys, and stay with us, because some memories deserve to be remembered forever.